Yeah.
Trap games. They're on everyone's schedule every single year, but the big question is, will your team fall victim to the trap? Today, guys, we are taking a look at arguably the biggest trap games for every SEC school heading into this 2022 college football season, and we'll be doing this for every single Power 5 conference, breaking down what might be the biggest trap game and the biggest area where a team could slip up unexpectedly heading in this season, of course, as we get ready for prediction season coming up here in just a few weeks. But we're going to go ahead and jump right on into our trap games, guys. Again, we have the date and the opponent, and we're going to start up at the top and work our way down the list, starting with Alabama, where we think their biggest trap game is Arkansas on October 1st. You know, Alabama has a handful of marquee matchups, guys. On September 10th, they travel to Texas. Some say that could be a trap game. October 15th, they travel to Tennessee, an up-and-coming Tennessee team. But Arkansas proves to be the biggest trap game for the Crimson Tide. The Razorbacks nearly upset Alabama in Tuscaloosa last year, only falling 42-35. There's a very good chance that Arkansas and Alabama could be undefeated heading into this matchup at the beginning of October. So you'd be looking at a top 10 showdown in Fayetteville, sold-out crowd, and again, the Razorbacks have the opportunity to be even better than they were last year, and now they get this game at home. If the Hogs can nearly win in Tuscaloosa, they absolutely can in Fayetteville, and if the Razorbacks upset Alabama, they will be looking like legitimate, not only SEC title contenders, but legitimate playoff contenders as well. So Alabama, their biggest trap game right now for us, coming on the road in Fayetteville at the beginning of October. Arkansas, the team that could take down Alabama, their biggest trap game comes on the road as well, October 15th at BYU. This is a tough spot. You know, anytime you get a non-conference game that breaks up the flow of your conference schedule, to me that automatically is a trap game. But especially when you're playing a good team like BYU, it makes it even more so. BYU out in Provo, arguably going to be more likely going to be a late night game for the Razorbacks. That doesn't bode well for them, especially considering 2 weeks prior they'll be playing Alabama. The week after Alabama, they'll be playing a road game at Mississippi State, which many could say that would be the trap game for the Hogs more so, either having a Bama hangover or riding that Bama high after a win and then falling flat the very next game. So Mississippi State and BYU, back-to-back road games on the 8th and 15th. We think BYU is going to be the tougher test in a game that Arkansas very well could lose right before their bye week. How about Auburn? September 17th, they played Penn State. Some will say, how is this a trap game? Auburn might not even be favored in this game. But I'm going to go out and say that Auburn probably will. Auburn more than likely will be favored in this game on the Plains. And this is a huge game for both teams. Auburn needing to get a marquee win on their resume. Penn State, depending on how they fare in that Week 1 matchup against Purdue, could very well still be in the top 25 or could be reeling a little bit and in desperate need of this win over Auburn. Regardless, it's a resume-boosting win for whoever comes away with this victory. Auburn nearly took down Penn State in Happy Valley last year. Penn State, though, looking to come on the road and get their second straight win over the Tigers. And again, with everything that's been going on with Auburn this offseason, some uncertainty at the quarterback position, while the Tigers could be favored against the Nittany Lions, this is a game they very easily could lose despite it being on their home turf. How about Florida? November 12th, towards the end of the year, taking on South Carolina. Florida, guys, is the anomaly this year. What are we going to see out of Billy Napier in year one? We know they've got a star quarterback in Anthony Richardson, but that's about it. The Gators disappointed big time in 2021. Can they bounce back with a new head coach in 2022? And as they near the end of this year, guys, South Carolina with Shane Beamer really has shown that they're not scared of anybody. They're certainly not scared of Florida. So coming into the Swamp isn't going to be something that really scares the Gamecocks. It's not going to scare Shane Beamer. Can the Gamecocks, with Spencer Rattler, both teams potentially fighting for a bowl berth, depending on how they fare earlier in the year, this game is going to be huge. And I think this is an area where Florida could slip up as they haven't had the best success against South Carolina. Yes, have won a handful of games, did not last year, obviously, but have won a handful of games recently, but not in as dominating fashion as some would think. How about Georgia? Handful of games for Georgia here, but we think Tennessee on November 5th is the big one. If you're looking for the two biggest contenders against Georgia in the SEC East, it's Tennessee and Kentucky. We think the biggest trap game for the Bulldogs is at home against the Volunteers because of how good we think Tennessee will be. The Volunteers are a legitimate good team heading into 2022. They were hanging with Georgia for about the first half last year in Knoxville, and of course ultimately collapsed just like almost every team did against the Bulldogs last year. And we think Tennessee, though, could put up better numbers this year. We think they could take Georgia all the way down to the wire despite the game being in Athens. And if you don't agree with that, guys, if you say Tennessee, no way, we're going to say the other trap game for Georgia is the road game at Mississippi State. It's sandwiched in between the Tennessee and Kentucky games. Could be riding a high, could be riding a low, depending on what happens against Tennessee. That Mississippi State game could be very difficult for the Bulldogs, especially with that air raid offense that Mike Leach has implemented in Starkville. How about Kentucky? South Carolina again, October 8th. We've seen some instant classics between the Wildcats and the Gamecocks. And again, the Gamecocks, South Carolina, they're no longer this sleeper team. They're no longer this team that people are going to laugh at. Shane Beamer in 1 year completely transformed the culture in Columbia. And then with the addition of Spencer Rattler and everybody else that he brought in and how well they did last year in year one, South Carolina is going to be taken seriously. And they absolutely can hang and take down a Kentucky team that might win 9 or 10 games in 2022. At least they have that potential. So Kentucky cannot afford to overlook that. Again, if you see down here, they play Ole Miss on October 1st. So right after that, maybe a big win over the Rebels or disappointing after a loss against the Rebels, depending on how they fare. That game against South Carolina could be where the Wildcats slip up. LSU. November 12th at Arkansas. So the Razorbacks, once again, a trap game for another big West opponent. This one, to me, is a no-brainer. LSU, the week prior, will be playing Alabama. And we know a thing or two about the Bama hangover, right? We've actually seen it a few times from LSU. So LSU, again, they somehow upset Alabama. They're riding the high. They fall flat. They lose to Alabama, maybe in dominating fashion, who knows. They come into Fayetteville against a good Arkansas team who beat them in Death Valley last year, and they fall flat again to Arkansas. So this is a game where I think the Razorbacks get the Tigers in a good spot, especially with the game being in Fayetteville. That's a major trap game for the Tigers. If you disagree with that, the other trap game for LSU is their season opener against Florida State, one that is massive for Brian Kelly and Mike Norvell with the Seminoles. So that's a trap game where LSU is already favored, but one where they could easily slip up, and it would be a shock if they did. Mississippi State, their upset game, their trap game, early, September 10th at Arizona. Yes, Arizona was god-awful last year. We know that. But they've added a lot of key transfers. They've added a lot of key recruits. They added Jaden DeLora, a strong quarterback from Washington State that hopefully will see the Wildcats win more than one game like they did just last year in 2021. The game is out west, obviously playing in the desert, late-night games that can screw with those teams from the south, just like we mentioned with Arkansas having to go west to take on BYU. We could see the same thing happen with Mississippi State early on in the year. And let's not sleep on the fact that the Bulldogs do play Memphis in week 1, and they fell to Memphis last year. So that could also be your other trap game. But we think the Arizona game is one where Mississippi State, Mike Leach, they can't afford to overlook Arizona. They can't afford to look at what happened last year with the Wildcats. Got to focus now. Playing out in the desert is never easy. Missouri, September 10th at Kansas State. Kind of hard to find a game for Missouri. It's not a horrible schedule for them, and a lot of the games we don't believe they're going to be favored in. They could be a slight favor on the road in Manhattan, and that's why this game could be a trap game for them. This is a winnable game against a Kansas State team that is usually pretty solid. Last year had a solid year under Chris Klieman and just added a star transfer quarterback in Adrian Martinez from Nebraska. Martinez paired with Deuce Vaughn could give this Missouri defense a lot of trouble. A Missouri defense that was horrendous in 2021. So this is a bit of a trap game for them and could get Eli Drinkwitz off on the wrong foot early in 2022. Again, a make-or-break year, we believe, for Drinkwitz and the Tigers in Columbia. Ole Miss, we just mentioned a second ago, their game against Kentucky. That is a bit of a trap game for us. That's going to be one of the more intriguing East-West matchups in the SEC this year. Two teams that were spectacular, phenomenal last year. Two teams that both could contend for 9 or 10 wins in 2022. And that could be the difference for Kentucky or Ole Miss. Whether they win 9 or 10 games could be decided right there on October 1st. This is a trap game for Ole Miss, despite hosting the Wildcats, guys. Kentucky's a good enough team where they can come in here and pull off this upset. A few years ago, we saw an instant classic between the Wildcats and the Rebels. Would not be surprised to see one again. Ole Miss, we believe, will be a slight favorite coming into this game. But again, that's why they're trap games. Teams where they're slight favorites but could get upset, could fall short to their opponent. South Carolina, October 29th at home against Missouri. The Gamecocks don't have a horrible schedule either. It was kind of difficult to find a game that we looked at and said, yeah, we don't know if that's a trap game or not. And we think the Missouri game could be, as they enter that final month of the year. They're riding high after a couple big victories. Spencer Rattler's doing good things with the Gamecocks, and they fall short to what we believe is an inferior opponent in Missouri right before they enter that final month of the year, which could be huge in determining if South Carolina gets one back to a bowl game or even has a better year than that, winning 7 or 8 regular season games. So that Missouri game is going to be tough, going to be tricky for South Carolina, one they can't afford to overlook or fall short in. Tennessee, October 8th at LSU. You could argue that the other trap game is the road game at South Carolina on November 19th. But first off, Death Valley is not an easy place to play. LSU is a team that we don't really know what to expect from under Brian Kelly in year one. Also, this game against LSU is right before Tennessee plays Alabama. And Tennessee wants to take down Alabama. They were hanging with the Crimson Tide last year before a big second half collapse and really a big fourth quarter collapse. So the road game at LSU is a trap game for them because they could be looking ahead to Alabama. On paper, you could argue that Tennessee is the better team than LSU right now. So will Tennessee be able to go into Death Valley and pull off an upset? That's the $1 million question. But right now, major trap game for the Volunteers, especially if they start off the year extremely hot. Final two, Texas A&M. Their trap game, October 1st at Mississippi State. They fell to the Bulldogs in College Station last year, so it's not out of the realm of possibility to see Mike Leach pull off an upset over the Aggies. Why is this a bigger trap game? Because Mississippi State is sandwiched right in between A&M's game against Arkansas on September 24th and their Alabama game on October 8th. Sandwiched right in between them. So A&M could be reeling after another loss to Arkansas. They fell to the Razorbacks last year, but they absolutely, regardless of their outcome against Arkansas, will be looking ahead to the Alabama game after the big feud between Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban. Big feud this offseason between the two. They're already licking their chops to go into Tuscaloosa to try to take Alabama down again for the second year in a row. Mississippi State could steal the spotlight from that game if they pull off this upset. It's in Starkville. Major trap game for Texas A&M. And finally, Vanderbilt. Not many trap games for arguably the worst team in the SEC, but their trap game for us is the road game at Hawaii in week 0, August 27th. Vanderbilt is already a 7-point favorite in that game, and we're actually shocked that it's that high. Because yes, while Vanderbilt on paper is the better team, going all the way out to Hawaii, it's difficult for teams. The travel is difficult, and I believe that Hawaii can hang with the Commodores. Vanderbilt cannot take that game lightly. No one can take that game lightly. And again, Vanderbilt, a team that will be lucky to win 3 or 4 games. They need to start 1-0, but this is a major trap game all the way out on the island. So there you have it, guys. Those are the trap games for every SEC program heading into 2022. We will have predictions for all of these games and deeper analysis for all of these games here in just a few weeks when we kick off our prediction season. But we want to give you a heads up, and we want to give your team a heads up. Watch out for these opponents. Will your team fall victim to the trap? We'll find out here in just a few weeks. So guys, as always, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos. Check out everything down in the description below. And of course, please continue to help us build our channel, guys. Become a part of what we're building here on the channel here at the Gridiron Expert. We want you to become a part of our GE Nation so you don't miss out on any college football content for the rest of the year. So make sure to become a part of that. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. And we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.